Greetings, Ventures. This is Lorne, your guild advisor, and welcome back to this week's installment of Cuts and Changes for DanMachi Season 4, where I highlight the differences between the original light novel source and the anime adaptation, in addition to providing extra context for what you see in the show. This week, with episode 13, we spent a lot more time with Ryu and Bell, and the situation only seems to get worse as they narrowly escape the Juggernaut, but also realize that they have to survive in the deep levels while completely exhausted and devoid of any supplies. The Hestia expedition party also continues their struggle against the Amphis Bina, as things look bleak for both Mikoto and Haruhime, while it seems like reinforcements are finally making their way down to the dungeon. Without further ado, let's start the breakdown. The episode starts off with Tsubuki, captain of Amphis Familia, cracking a hammer in Welp's workshop at the Hestia Familia home. If you don't recognize her, she has only made a few appearances in the anime, but most of you should remember her from Season 3, when she helped Welp and Mikoto fight off against Gareth during the Xenos arc. If you've seen the Sword Oratoria side series, she also appears there, helping with one of Loki Familia's expeditions. This level 5 half-dwarf continues to watch after Welp, even after he switched from Amphis to Hestia Familia. Originally, she would have been introduced during Season 2's adaptation of Volume 8, but her scenes along with Welp's backstory were cut from the anime. However, you can view this story via danmemo, the DanMachi mobile game. Going back to the show, Miak and Naza come to ask Tsubuki to become part of the Hestia expedition party reinforcements. In the light novel, this scene should have happened right after Hestia asked the waitresses for their help in episode 12, and I honestly think that moving it to episode 13 made the pacing feel a bit awkward because Tsubuki and the waitresses end up all the way on floor 18 of the dungeon just a few minutes later in the episode's runtime. After Tsubuki's recruitment, the anime goes back to floor 37 as Bell and Ryu are being hunted by Juggernaut. Like I said last week, the anime is restructuring the order of events from the novel so viewers can see Bell and Ryu sooner. In a straightforward adaptation, you likely would not see them until 4 episodes into the second half of Season 4 at the earliest. Anyway, in the novel, Bell is actually going through various passageways and making constant turns in an attempt to shake Juggernaut off their tail. But the anime goes straight to the point with Bell charging his Argonaut on the run, before he fires it towards the ceiling, creating a cave-in, ultimately blocking off Juggernaut from pursuing them further. It's mentioned in the novel that Bell noticed fear filling the Juggernaut's eyes when it noticed him charging his firebolt. It's likely that the monster was remembering the move that was responsible for its missing right arm. One thing to keep in mind is that 437 is described as almost completely dark in the light novels, but they can't exactly make the anime too dark, otherwise watchers would find it difficult to see what's happening on screen. So, the anime staff is doing what they can to give off that effect by keeping the colors muted. In the light novel, Skull Sheep do not have glowing red eyes, but instead, empty eye sockets. All monsters having red eyes is something only done for the anime adaptation. Also, a lot of the monsters that are found on floor 37 have a skeletal theme, the most prominent one being the floor boss known as Udeus, which Ai's notably defeated by herself. We are then brought back to floor 18, where we see that both Dormal and Luvis are being notified about the current situation in the water capital. This is when the reinforcement crew, led by Tsubuki, overhears the conversation. A lot of the dialogue from the original scene in the novel has been shortened or omitted. Originally, Anya demands that Dormal and Luvis tell them about Ryu's situation, instead of just running off and declaring that they're going to save Ryu and the rest of the group like in the anime. It's also mentioned that Dormal and Luvis felt something was off about Chloe and Renoa, as they did not seem like adventurers, and they would be right, as they are formerly an assassin and bounty hunter respectively. Luvis actually recognizes Anya, thinking he's seen her before, a reference to Anya being more well known when she was still formerly a part of Freya Familia more than 5 years ago. This reinforcement crew, filled with adventurers level 4 and above, exchanged some banter on their way to the entrance to floor 19 in the novel, but it's possible the anime could cover it later. The anime transitions back to Bell and Ryu and their encounter with the Skull Sheep. Bell is taken aback by the monster's sudden burst of speed because he was not able to predict its movement due to a combination of the monster's cloak-like skin and the darkness covering its body. The show does a pretty good job at showcasing how desperate and frantic Bell is throughout this battle. He's taken several hits and was only able to defeat the Skull Sheep because of the Goliath Scarf, giving him an opportunity to find and break the magic stone inside the monster's body. Even so, that one battle has left him in shock, his left arm hurting so much he wishes he could cut it off. Ryu is reluctant to accompany Bell, believing herself to be dead weight, but our boy is able to convince her through logic rather than relying on pure emotion. After all, without having access to Ryu's experience of Floor 37, there is no way Bell can make it out of the dungeon alive. Also, if he left Ryu behind, he simply wouldn't be Bell Cranel anymore. They resolve to find the dead end where they can take a breather. We're finally taken back to the fight against the Amphis Bina floor boss, and for the most part, it seems as if the party's finally getting used to the monster's attack patterns and how to react accordingly. Mikoto detects the monster's location after a dive and uses her Zeka sword technique, tearing into the neck of the red dragon head, while the others follow up with their own attacks. The battle was proceeding smoothly. The light novel even points out that the blue dragon head's breath attacks seemed to be weakening. The party appeared to be winning the battle of endurance against the floor boss. Unfortunately, the situation immediately flips when the monster employs a new tactic, by climbing the waterfall and jumping down, creating a tsunami that washes over everyone. In a normal fight against the Amphis Bina, if the monster is getting too injured, it will dive to the bottom of the lake to recover. In this case, the floor boss was spawned early by the dungeon in order to eliminate the threat, so it would not give the expedition party an opportunity to escape by leaving them alone as it recovers. Mikoto is hit on the head by a large piece of ice and falls underwater, getting bit by several raiderfish. Once again, we go back to Bell and Ryu, and are reminded of how tense and full of dread Bell is when even a drop of water sounds off alarms in his head. They see a light in the distance, and Bell's spirits immediately light up, as he is filled with illusions of hope, believing that adventurers are close by. He even thinks they may have possibly encountered Loki or Freya Familia, as any party that goes into Floor 37 clearly has to be strong. Unfortunately, reality is cruel, and extinguishes Bell's hopes with the reveal of corpses. There are also signs that one of the adventurers committed suicide, as their hands are grasped around a weapon drawn into their chest, along with their blood-stained clothing. Bell and Ryu arrived at a scene filled with despair. The dungeon remains merciless, as 3 more Skull Sheep find them. Bell, in a frantic and desperate frenzy, unleashes multiple firebolts at them, causing the monsters to flee, while also covering the entrance to the room with rock. Bell enters a mine down from using too much magic, and becomes barely responsive before Ryu brings him back to his senses. When Ryu tells him to sleep for 5 minutes, Bell is reminded of his time training with eyes. He recalls that the Sword Princess told him that adventurers need to be able to sleep anywhere at any time. Even if it was just 5 minutes, Bell needed to recover what little energy he could if he and Ryu were to survive. Ryu puts on a brave face to reassure Bell and get him to rest, but you can see her expression immediately tense up, as the next 5 minutes were most definitely going to be a struggle. Monsters not appearing for 5 minutes was merely a best case scenario. In the aftermath of the tsunami, the party realizes that Mikoto was missing, as Daphne gets a slight clue when she sees blood in the water. The internal monologue that freezes Cassandra in place during the dragon's breath attack is anime original and does not appear in the novel. While this behavior is in character, I can imagine a lot of viewers being frustrated seeing Cassandra act in this manner for the second time in a row during a battle. The breath attack was simply immediate, and Cassandra and Lily could not react in time. Haruhime pushes both Cassandra and Lily out from the path of the flames and appears to be enveloped in the blue fire. The anime does a great portrayal of Aisha's reaction via her facial expression and voice acting, and the episode ends with Oka and Aisha vowing vengeance for both Mikoto and Haruhime. So far, the anime has done a great job of nailing the tone of dread and fear in regards to Bell and Ryu's turmoil on Floor 37. We can clearly see how shaken up and disturbed Bell is throughout the entire ordeal. It looks like the rest of the Hestia Familia party isn't exactly having an easy time either. We did not see too much of the Amphis Bina fight, but so far I've been generally happy with how it's been adapted with few exceptions, such as overdoing Cassandra's indecision. In this week's danmemo side story, you can see what Cyr was doing while she was absent from the tavern. She ends up meeting with Alan Frommel of Freya Familia, asking for his help. Those of you who have watched my video on the waitresses should remember that Alan and Anya are siblings. This scene is actually not in the original novel, so this is a neat expansion to the material. As always, I'll leave a link to this short story in the video description for those without access to the mobile game. Anyway, that will conclude this week's Cuts and Changes video, and I'll see you for episode 14 next week. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more DanMachi content, and to follow me on my socials. This is Lorne, your guild advisor, signing out.